My name is Ashley Politz. I am the Executive Director of the Louisiana AAP and very excited to welcome everyone here today. We'll be talking about the BeSmart campaign and gun safety. So just a couple of quick notes before we get started. Funding for this webinar series has been made possible by a grant from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the National Center for Child Fatality Review and Prevention. Just so you know, this meeting is being recorded. We will share out the recordings and the slide deck with everyone who is registered. We'll also be putting this on our YouTube channel so that you can view that at a later time or share that with others. We also really want to make this an interactive session. So we ask that you put questions that you may have, raise your hand throughout the presentation. You will have the ability to mute and unmute yourself. So just be aware that while our speaker is talking that you are on mute. But if you want to come off of mute later during a question and answer period, we can absolutely, you can absolutely do that. Again, because this is being recorded, please be sure not to include any or disclose any personal health information. If you're sharing information about a case or a patient or something like that, we want to make sure that that's all protected as we go through this. So this has been accredited for 1.0 AMA PRA Category 1 credits. So at the end of today's training, we'll have a link and a QR code that'll take you to a SurveyMonkey. When you complete that evaluation, that is how you will earn your credit. Our faculty, Shannon, has no relevant financial disclosures to make. One of our planning committee members, Dr. Joseph Bocchini, has disclosed a research grant. You can see that there on the screen. So our presentation today, BeSmart Louisiana, is presented by Shannon. Is it Cyan?
Sion.
Sion, okay. So she is a native New Orleans. She's got 20 years spanning nonprofits across the greater New Orleans area. She currently serves as Philanthropy and Community Partnership Director at the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. As a volunteer advocate for firearm safety, Shannon also serves as the New Orleans area lead for Everytown's BeSmart program, which we'll talk about today. Shannon's a proud mom of 2 vivacious girls who attend public school in New Orleans. Shannon, the floor is yours. I'll advance your slides on your cue.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. I'm going to be talking about the BeSmart program, which was developed by Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And this is a program that brings together parents and adults concerned about kids and gun safety. In addition to this program model, at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about a lot of BeSmart resources that are available to both you and the communities that you serve. You all got pretty much my introduction. I'm a New Orleans native. I'm a mom of 2 girls. When I was a teenager, I also experienced the death of a cousin to firearm suicide. And working in the public education sector, I'm very aware of how gun violence impacts a lot of our communities on a daily basis. And that's a lot of what has inspired me to get involved with this work. You can advance the slides. One more. Thanks. So in the US, firearms are the leading cause of death for children, as many of you may know. As this slide shows, more than 1,600 children under the age of 18 are killed with guns every year in the US. That's an average of 5 children every day, which is a very high number. When children in America are killed with guns, the majority of those deaths, 53%, are homicides. So that's nearly 900 children each year that are the victim of firearm homicides. Another 700 children die by firearm suicide each year, and 90 are unintentionally shot and killed. Next slide. So we know that approximately 5.4 million children in the US live in a household with at least one loaded unlocked gun. This number has likely increased during the COVID-19 pandemic because we know that there's been a surge in firearms sales throughout the pandemic. So while school shootings and mass shootings typically make national headlines, the reality is that for children under the age of 13, gun homicides occur most frequently in the home. So it's something that we all need to be aware about, especially in Louisiana, that there are a lot of firearms in homes and we want to do what we can to keep kids safe. One study showed that nearly 90% of unintentional shooting deaths and injuries among children under the age of 15 occur in the home, whether it's their home, a friend's home, a relative's home. What's more is that we know that in incidents.
It looks like she may have lost connections. Jane, I think that I saw you on. Do you want to share a little bit about what we've done with BeSmart in Louisiana while we're waiting for Shannon to get back on?
Sure, Ashley, I'll take myself off video and hopefully I won't freeze. So let's see. So let me know, somebody chat if for some reason we're having troubles today with Zoom. But good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jane Herway, and I work with the Office of Public Health, Bureau of Family Health. And so our office convenes the Louisiana State Child Death Review Panel. And so there is a state panel with 20 plus legislatively mandated members. And then there are local regional panels in each of our 9 public health regions around the state that are convened by our regional maternal child health coordinators. Firearm secure storage became a priority in the time, a few months before the pandemic. We had been looking at data in child death review, and we were looking at just the occurrences of accidental shootings, firearms being used in suicide, etc. So the state panel decided to prioritize firearm secure storage. So it convened a work group and then worked pretty much over a couple of years, researching what's the most effective way to communicate about firearm secure storage. What does the research say? Also reviewing all sorts of messages that were already available nationally, testing messages with Louisiana gun owners. The group felt it was very important to have messages that resonated with Louisiana gun owners, and they felt it was very important to have messages that were not political, that really spoke to everyone's desire to keep kids safe and the responsibility that all gun owners feel about, they really wouldn't want anything to happen to their loved ones or to anyone else's loved ones. So it was a 2-year process of testing messages. We did have a partnership with BeSmart National, Everytown for Gun Safety, who provided free of charge a lot of the changing in messages to reflect the sentiments and the messages that resonated with Louisiana gun owners and some of the graphic design elements that we wanted in Louisiana. So it sounds like maybe Shannon is back. Should I stop right now? We'll show a preview of the materials later on after Shannon finishes her presentation, but the Louisiana specific materials.
Yes, I apologize. I'm actually in my office today and apparently our internet went out for a minute. So hopefully I don't have that issue again. I don't know exactly where I dropped off, but you've got that statistic that most children that gain access to firearms are doing so in the home, either their home or the home of friends and relatives. And as Jane was saying, the BeSmart approach is really apolitical. We work with and even there are volunteers for BeSmart and Moms Demand Action that are gun owners themselves. We know that there are a lot of gun owners in this state. We really just try to bring everyone together with the understanding that what we're doing is just trying to keep children safe from firearms. We believe that most gun owners do want to be responsible gun owners. And so that is what the BeSmart model does. It's a way that we can all, gun owners, non-gun owners, can talk about firearm safety and preventing kids from having unsupervised access to guns. So next slide. Again, BeSmart really leaves politics at the door. We talk to adults and ask that we can agree on 3 things, right? Number 1, we all want kids to grow up happy and healthy. Number 2, we each have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes, our families, and our communities. And that includes whether or not you might have a gun in your home. And number 3 is that if we can prevent even one child gun death or injury, that it's our responsibility to do so. So we're not really here to talk about laws or politics, just here to talk about firearms safety. Next slide. So this slide, it just has a few different headlines about what the consequences of unsecured guns can look like. Unfortunately, there are headlines every single day that look like this. These particular headlines, the first story, top left, in January of 2018, there was a school shooting in Kentucky at Marshall County High School. More than a dozen students were shot and wounded. 2 of them, Bailey Holt and Preston Cope, were killed. The 16-year-old shooter had gained access to his stepfather's unsecured pistol from his bedroom. The next tragedy took place in May of 2018. A 4-year-old boy from Louisa, Virginia, unintentionally shot his 2-year-old brother Tyson after accessing an unsecured gun that was being kept high up in an upper cabinet. The next headline on the bottom left illustrates that when kids are looking to carry guns out of fear, easy access to guns can help facilitate the cycle of violence, unfortunately. Here, 17-year-old Zeke of Jackson, Mississippi, told the Jackson Free Press that some young people in his community carry guns out of fear of being robbed or shot. And they believe that having a gun will allow them to defend themselves. I live in New Orleans. I work in education. Our schools hear things like this all the time. The final story is a 13-year-old Mikey from Brewster, New York. Mike was a friendly, popular 8th grader. He was an expert bowler and avid athlete. He loved video games. In January 13, he came home from school, took one of his father's unlocked loaded guns, and shot himself. His family knew him to be a happy kid, and they don't believe that he per se intended to die that day, but he came home, was in a certain mood, had access to a loaded gun, made an impulsive decision, and unfortunately, it was a fatal decision. So all of these stories sort of show the fallout of what can happen when children get access to unsecured firearms. Each story is a little bit different, but unfortunately, they're all tragic situations that really could have been prevented. Next slide. It's important to remember that even if you yourself are practicing secure storage, or if you don't have a gun in your home, you can never be sure about what's going on in other people's homes. We don't know about the personal decisions that other people are making on a daily basis. And so this is where BeSmart comes in, how we can all learn and talk to each other and talk to our communities about being smart and securely storing our firearms. Next slide. So as you saw in the previous slide, BeSmart is an acronym. The S stands for securing guns in homes and vehicles. We know that 13 million households with children contain at least one firearm. The majority of children in gun-owning households know where that gun is stored. We already know that in incidents of gunfire on school grounds, the majority of shooters obtain those guns from their home or the home of a friend or family member. And again, we see these headlines every day, unfortunately. So what do we mean by securing guns? A gun should be stored locked and unloaded, with ammunition stored separately. This is the safest method of securing firearms. Hiding a gun is not securing a gun. We know that that often leads to tragedy. We saw a headline previously about a 4-year-old boy who was able to access a gun that was stored high up in a cabinet. Kids are curious. It's important that we secure safely our firearms. And again, as adults, it's our responsibility to prevent that easy access for kids. So we know that research finds that secure storage is associated with a decreased risk of firearm suicide and unintentional firearm injury. One study showed that households that locked both firearms and ammunition had a 78% lower risk of self-inflicted firearm injuries among children and teens, and an 85% lower risk of unintentional firearm injury. So what does secure storage look like? There are a lot of different methods. You can use a cable lock, a lockbox, a firearm safe. Again, we recommend storing firearms separately from the ammunition. And BeSmart has a lot of resources for individuals in our local community about where you can access different secure storage products. One other thing I should note is that also unsecured guns contribute to a high number of guns being stolen each year and then used in incidents of violence. It's estimated that 380,000 guns are stolen from private gun owners each year, which is a staggering number. And gun owners are 3 times more likely to have a gun stolen if they had carried it in the last month. So for instance, if people are frequently carrying their firearms around and then, putting them away without securely storing it, it's obviously going to be more likely that individuals who might be looking to acquire that firearm would be able to find it. So for instance, we say that putting your gun in your glove compartment or under your seat is not securely storing it if it's not locked or even ideally in a safe or in the home. And again, we have more information on secure storage methods and resources. Next slide. The M is for modeling responsible behavior. Again, we said that every law-abiding adult has the opportunity to make a decision about whether or not they want to have a gun in their home, but you cannot rely on the fact that curious kids won't find that gun. So what we need to do as adults is model responsible behavior around our children. As we saw, I think on the last slide, one study shows that the majority of children are aware of where their parents store their guns, and more than 1/3 have actually reported handling their parents' guns, many doing so without the knowledge of their parent. Nearly 1/4 of parents did not know that their children were handling the guns inside of their home. So it's important that we model responsible behavior for our children in addition to secure storage. While it's important to talk to kids about gun safety, we also know that that's a precaution, not a guarantee. Additional studies have shown that young children who went through a week-long gun safety training are actually just as likely as children with no training to approach and play with a handgun. Sorry, next slide, please. So our A is about asking. As we know, 5.4 million children in the US live in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. The A is about asking individuals if they have firearms in their home. I know parents and caretakers we feel very comfortable asking about a number of other safety issues when our children are going to a friend's house, a relative's house, and we ask about allergens in the household. We ask about pets. Do you have a pool? Do you have a trampoline? Will kids be riding in a car seat if they're going from point A to point B? Maybe older teens. Are parents going to be home while my kid's there? Is there access to alcohol? We feel very comfortable asking those questions. And since we know that firearms are the #1 leading cause of death of children in the country, we really need to make sure that we're also comfortable asking, are there firearms in the home? If there are firearms, how are those being secured? Next slide, please. So this is a sample conversation. Like I said, people feel very comfortable asking about a lot of other safety topics, but not always asking about guns. We recommend for parents, if they're more comfortable, maybe asking over an email or over a text message, just to sort of get comfortable asking that question and talking about it. I know as a parent, for instance, I have been working with this program for long enough. I feel very comfortable asking. I also volunteer that information up front when new kids are coming over to my house. My husband told me I was being awkward doing that. And I told him, I think it's important that we try to keep our kids safe, and that I'm also just trying to model normalizing that conversation for other adults in my community. Next slide, please. So the R in BeSmart is about recognizing the role of guns in suicide. Access to a gun can be the difference between life and death, as we saw in the headline earlier, Mikey's story, where his parents felt that he was very happy. He made an impulsive decision that one day he knew where the firearm was, and unfortunately, that decision turned fatal for his family. As children get older, parents also might need to consider reassessing their gun storage methods. So for instance, if you have a simple cable lock, maybe getting a gun safe. If kids are getting older, you want to be sure that that firearm is very securely stored and kids aren't able to access it easily. And also, one other thing I should mention is that if you have a loved one who's in distress, you can also consider temporarily removing a gun from your home. So some information to consider. Most people who attempt suicide actually do not die unless they use a gun. 90% of suicide attempts with a gun do result in death, and that's a much higher fatality rate compared with other means of self-harm. So if you have a family member or a friend who you think is in distress, like I said, you can consider temporarily removing that gun from your home. We have resources again on this. Oftentimes local law enforcement are willing to temporarily store guns. Some licensed gun dealers or gun ranges are willing to do so. Or if you have another friend or family member that might have secure storage in their home that you feel comfortable talking to about that, if you feel an urgent need to sort of remove that firearm from your personal property. And again, we have resources on that. Next slide. So the National Youth Survey conducted by the CDC showed that 17% of high school students surveyed had seriously considered attempting suicide within the last year. With the pandemic and kids being out of school, kids may be feeling more socially isolated than normal. Those numbers have probably increased. One study showed that 41% of adolescents in gun-owning households reported having easy access to guns. As we discussed earlier, research shows that secure firearm storage is associated with a decrease in the risk of firearm suicide. Next slide. So we also have a handout with more information, facts, and resources on child firearm suicide for anyone who needs that. It does include the suicide prevention hotline information. And sorry, next slide. So T is tell, and we say that's the power of being smart and participating in this model of responsible gun ownership and secure storage. So we've heard from people across the country that because of BeSmart, they know how to ask about the presence of guns in homes that they're visiting. They are recognizing the role of guns in suicide among teens and young adults. They're modeling responsible behavior, and research also shows that law enforcement, the military, and hunting and outdoor groups have been effective in communicating this message as well. So we try to spread the message as far and wide as we can. Next slide. So I sort of talked very broadly about national statistics and all that. I also wanted to drill down a little bit closer, and then Jane can speak more to specific efforts going on and resources here in Louisiana. So in 2021, there were at least 392 unintentional shootings nationwide. Sorry. And in Louisiana, there were 20 unintentional shootings by children, resulting in 7 deaths and 13 injuries. I think part of my slide got whacked off there. Next slide. So to date, already in 2022, there have been at least 126 unintentional shootings by children nationwide, resulting in 55 deaths and 78 injuries. In Louisiana, there have been at least 9 unintentional shootings by children, resulting in 5 deaths and 5 injuries. That was as of the end of May. So unfortunately, I think those numbers have probably grown in the last month. Next slide. So Everytown has a report called Preventable Tragedies, Findings from the Not an Accident Index. You can also, that Not an Accident Index has a lot of data specific nationwide, as well as you can drill down deeper into local communities. From 2015 through 2020, there were over 2,000 unintentional shootings by children under age 18. Resulting in 765 deaths and 1,300 injuries. So we can see that this is really at a crisis level of what's happening when kids have access to unsecured firearms. And researchers estimate that the number of children living in households with firearms has increased dramatically. We know that that also has been the case since the pandemic as well. So while it says 5.4 million children live in a home with at least one loaded unlocked gun, we can actually assume that those numbers are a little bit higher right now in 2022. Next slide. So key findings here are that shootings by children, unfortunately, are also most often shootings of children. So 91% of children under the age of 18 injured or killed by a gun were injured or killed by another child. 7 in 10 of unintentional child shootings occurred in homes, whether it's the home of the shooter, the victim, friend, relative. And what's important to note here is this often happens when children are home over the weekend, in the summer, school holidays. It's important that guns in homes are securely stored so that kids don't have access and accidents don't happen. States with the highest household gun ownership rates, for instance, where more than 50% of residents lived in gun owning households, they had quadruple the number of victims from unintentional shootings by children compared with the states of the lowest gun ownership rates. In Louisiana, our gun ownership rate is 53.1%. We know that there are a lot of guns in our communities, so it's important that we're talking to parents about securely storing their firearms, keeping kids safe from unsecured access. And next slide, I think I'm turning it over. Oh, this is our acronym again. I'm going to turn it over to Jane, though, to talk more about specific resources for individuals in Louisiana, and also happy to answer any questions anyone has after that.
Thank you, Shannon. And hello again, everyone. Shannon, I jumped in real quickly when Ashley was waiting for you to come back on. She had asked if I wanted to start talking a little bit about the priority from Louisiana Child Death Review.
Yeah, thank
you.
So
as I mentioned earlier, it has been a priority for Louisiana Child Death Review. And after doing extensive work over a couple of years, the work group was able to partner with the Louisiana Academy of Pediatrics as well as the Louisiana Children's Trust Fund to further develop the campaign. And as I mentioned briefly, the national partner, Everytown for Gun Safety, worked extensively with us, providing in-kind resources to help with modifications of materials so that the message reflected what we wanted the message just to reflect, that materials looked kind of what we were finding were design elements that we thought would resonate with Louisiana gun owners, as well as helping set up a web page. So what you see here is a screenshot. We call our campaign BeSmart Louisiana. And so there is a web page that's part of the overall BeSmart for kids.org/Louisiana, and you can find more resources. So there's steps to secure storage. There, to click on that button that says keeping your home safe with secure storage, it gives you different options and tips. There's a guide to secure gun storage devices, and then there's some information about talking to your children about guns. Also on this website, you can request a presentation for a Louisiana organization, and Shannon or one of her colleagues that are trained to do presentations will come to your group, to your organization and do a presentation. You can also request materials, and there's a way on the website where you can download some of the images from the 3 print materials that I'm about ready to preview you, so your organization can print those out on your own. We have, as I mentioned earlier, because Child Death Review has a regional panel and a regional subject matter expert who are called our regional maternal child health coordinators that work in 9 areas across the state. This is a statewide campaign. Our folks have been very, very busy. The maternal child health coordinators have been very busy disseminating these print materials. The first phase of the campaign is designed with print materials with the objective to be saturating the community as best we can with the resources that we have to get these into the hands of people, to Louisiana gun owners and organizations that are serving Louisiana gun owners, etc. So there've been some great partnerships. I know one of our regional MCH coordinator is on the line, and at least one I think I saw in the participant list, who have been working with their community advisory and action teams and the community organizations and healthcare providers and faith leaders, law enforcement, et cetera, in their region to make sure that people have these materials. So can we go to the next slide, please? So this is what we call the trifold pamphlet. So it's a handout. So essentially you're not really looking at it kind of in the order that it would go, but you can see the front image matches what you're going to see as the simple top line message: keep kids safe, secure your firearms, which is on our poster and our materials. But essentially you can see the content that is covered there. It's what is BeSmart. It gives you some statistics on firearm injuries being the leading cause of death for kids under 18 in Louisiana. It talks about firearm responsibility, how to talk with your family about gun safety, and then easy options. It's a very simple pamphlet, and as Shannon, reiterated, it is not political. It really just is all about keeping kids safe. So this is the pamphlet. And they also have, you'll notice, a QR code, which was on the pamphlet, and it's also on this poster that you're looking at here. And folks can scan that code and it will take them to the web page, which you can see the URL is besmartforkids.org/Louisiana. And that's the Louisiana specific content. And so these posters are being disseminated to different organizations, whether it's a parish hall at a church, whether it's a law enforcement agency, whether it's a pediatrician's office, a hospital emergency room, hospital clinic waiting areas, etc. So there are many different groups that are receiving posters and the pamphlets that you've seen. And then there's another piece, which is the next slide, which is what we call the palm card, or it's about postcard size. And essentially this one is just the same top line message: keep kids safe, secure your firearms. And then what else can you do? How it's simple, talk to your friends and neighbors, and then the responsibility of Louisiana gun owners. And that concept of responsibility was something that kept resonating with the gun owners that were involved in the development of the messages. So that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure, was present and a theme running, a current thread throughout the materials. So these palm cards, we have many of these, and these are, seen as more like, if you're doing a bigger outreach event and you need some materials for tabling, or you want to give out, simple, quick messages, and then there's the QR code on this one as well that will take people to the website. So those are the 3 print materials. We also do have on the webpage some social media information and posts. And so if organizations are interested, I know that Ashley put in the chat that I think materials AAP in Baton Rouge has a lot on hand. Most of ours through the regional coordinators, most of them have been disseminated. We have some more. I think Ashley ordered some more coming back. We'll be replenishing that. But if you're participating in this webinar and you have not seen these materials and know where to get them, please reach out to Ashley at AAP. I believe Shannon's going to give her contact information on the next slide. And then also, if you go to the website too, there are ways that you can request materials, or even if your organization has budget and you want to print some of your own materials, you can do that as well. So I think that's it. So go ahead. There you go, Shannon.
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. That's just our contact information. That was me on National Wear Orange Day. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that event, but every June, there's a National Wear Orange Day just to raise awareness about firearm safety. You can email me, it's besmart.shannon@gmail.com for different community presentations. You can email Jane for further information, or really the website is a wealth of resources where you can either access or request print materials, as well as, I believe, request presentations there.
One last thing before we go, in order to receive your credits for today, you'll need to complete an evaluation. So we are a couple minutes early. So if everybody wants to take out their phone, you can scan that QR code or type directly the link, which I will put in the chat box as well. So quick evaluation, it gives Shannon feedback, and it also gives us feedback in order to create your certificate. So I'll pause there and say thank you all so much for joining us. Really appreciate the conversation, and I'll again add in the chat box my contact information and this direct survey link. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.